So I was trying to write something this whole week, and I kept tearing up, and my mom's getting married next week, and I gotta save some of that energy for her wedding. So instead of, I'm going to be sharing with you a message that I wrote for a service last month at UU's Church of Berkeley, and I thought it was appropriate for this service as well. It begins with so many things that I do with a nerdy fantasy quote. This is from Brandon Sanderson's Oathbringer from the Stormlight Archives. Y'all should read it. The most important words a person can say are, "I will do better." These are not the most important words any person can say. I am a person, and they are what I needed to say. Journey before destination. Some may call it a simple platitude, but it is far more. A journey will have pain and failure. It is not only the steps forward that we must accept, it is the stumbles, the trials, the knowledge that we will fail, that we will hurt those around us. But if we stop, if we accept the person we are when we fall, the journey ends, and that failure becomes our destination. To love the journey is to accept no such end. I have found, through painful experience, that the most important step a person can take is always the next one. I still feel weird standing up here. I'm not a minister. I stumbled into being a director of religious education after being a preschool teacher who was just picking up Sunday childcare work. I am not a member of this church that I've worked for 7 years, nor do I particularly identify as a Unitarian Universalist, or even as a particularly religious or spiritual person at all, an identity that I have been at odds with since becoming the director of religious education. But I was asked to write a sermon by Reverend Marcus, the minister at the UU Church of Berkeley, and I had attended several retreats with him on the future of youth and young adult ministry, and I think that he might have interpreted my lack of patience and antagonistic questioning at these events as some sort of wisdom. He's very kind in that way. But I did say, yes, I will do this service. And I think that if I'm being completely honest, I said yes out of my own self-interest. And I'm sharing this message with all of you now, again, for my own benefit. There's something that I find myself in conflict with in this faith that I have become entangled in. And what better way to sort it out than here with all of you? The theme for the service that I did about a month ago came from doing things the wrong way. And so let us begin with people who are doing things the wrong way, our congregation's teens. So last November, I brought a group of our teens over to a service at UUCB. The trip was the first of several for our Neighboring Faiths program. They were learning about and visiting a variety of different spiritual communities as a means to expand their understanding of what faith can look like and to help guide them in creating their own statements of religious identity at the end of the year. The Sunday we chose to visit was the one following the presidential election, and it was a deeply moving service for me. Reverend Marcus spoke on what we can do when we feel our faith being shaken, when we lose faith in things we invested so much of ourselves into. One of the recurring themes was that of doing the next right thing. For me, personally, Reverend Marcus's words resonated deeply and touched on something I really, really needed to hear in a moment of frustration and fear. And then I talked to the 8 teenagers who I had brought to the service. When I asked what stood out to them, I was met with a resounding response of, "They sang a song from Frozen 2." When pressed about what they might like to incorporate into our services up in Santa Rosa, they said, "More Disney songs." One teen, when pressed about what he thought about this service, said, "Honestly, I don't really remember. I wasn't paying attention, but I did like the music." But 7 months later, when they reflected on their visit to UUCB right here in this sanctuary in front of dozens of members of our congregation, they said they liked the song from Frozen 2. You guys didn't even remember which one it was. To any of you who have teenagers or work with teenagers, I do not need to tell you how difficult it can be to get them to engage in earnest and vulnerable conversations. Often we do our best to expose them to profound lessons, literature, artwork, and performances in hopes that something sticks or they absorb a deeper message through osmosis. But in my case, as director of religious education, I feel obligated to make sure that my students engage with spiritual ideas and concepts in a way that's more meaningful than recognizing a song from a movie, because the way they were engaging with spirituality right now, it felt like it was the wrong way. They weren't really attending services at Santa Rosa, they weren't participating with the congregation at large, and opportunities for deep discussion always seemed to devolve into talking about video games and memes and Skibbity Sigma. They're throwing Paxton under the bus now. The part that was exceptionally frustrating to me was that this wasn't a class, they weren't being graded, and I didn't even care if they could remember a single fact about a religion. My goal for these kids was to find some connection to the spiritual, to find a sense of awe and wonder at the universe, to hold space for questions with unknowable answers, to feel like they were part of something bigger than the individual. Certainly, there was a way to get them to engage with spirituality. We just had to figure out what it was. Over the next few months, following our visit to Berkeley, the teens learned about Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and Buddhism. They attended services at these traditions, met with worship leaders, and reflected on the parts they resonated with. The persistence and exposure began to pay off, and the kids began to discuss topics of spirituality more freely. They felt moved by music and rituals. They experienced connection with those they were attending worship with and valued the wisdom that was shared by those worship leaders. However, as the end of the year approached, the teens' resonance with these experiences seemed to lose the impact we had hoped it had held. As Annika and I urged them to reflect on their spiritual and religious identities, we were met with the response of, I don't know. They remarked how they enjoyed some aspects of other faiths and were in particular fans of our fourth UU principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning because they could believe whatever they wanted. In fact, the religion they had the most interest in was Pastafarianism, the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. As their DRE, I became more and more certain that I was doing something wrong here. My job is to help these kids discover a deeper, fuller understanding of faith, but instead they were becoming indifferent to the idea of religion, maybe even Unitarian Universalism. And the more these teens articulated their beliefs, the more I worried that my own beliefs were at fault for guiding these kids away from seeking their own sense of spirituality. But why even care about encouraging these young people to participate in a spiritual journey in the first place? The profound answer is because Unitarian Universalists believe that spirituality and being a part of a faith community makes one's life better and more fulfilled. The cynical response is that we want young UUs to grow into adult UUs, and the journey to them becoming the future members that we want involves these young people seeing value in a spiritual community and connection. Regardless of your perspective, it is certainly in the best interest of UUs to bring young adults into the faith. One of the metaphors we use when discussing transition from youth to adulthood in Unitarian Universalism is the cliff and the bridge. The cliff describes where children are left when they turn 18, suddenly unable to participate in the programs and activities for young people within the church. In the past, it was assumed these burgeoning adults would simply enter into the adult part of UU life, attending services, joining committees, and participating in the congregations as full grown-ups. However, it was discovered we were losing young adults, and many young UUs would stop being engaged in their local congregations when they graduated high school. So the idea of the bridge was created to bring young UUs into UU adulthood with ministry, programs, and support geared toward this specific demographic. The image used on the UUA website for the bridge shows a young person standing at the top of a cliff and an arrow representing the bridge traveling straight down into the ravine of UU adult life. I've never been a big fan of that image. But the idea makes sense. Young adults are leaving Unitarian Universalism, and it's up to us to hold on to them, to make sure they remain a part of the faith. However, that image of the cliff and the bridge implies that one cannot be an adult and engage with this faith as they did when they were a child. That there is this prescribed way to be an adult Unitarian Universalist and a child Unitarian Universalist. A young person may not understand how to be an adult UU. They may stray from the path, and so it is our duty to correct them, to push them towards the goal of becoming members who attend Sunday service, who participate in committees, and become what we envision grown-ups to be. And I see this image, I hear this, and I think of our teens here, the youth who don't want to attend services, who are uncertain of wearing the UU label. I fear the bridge is one they will not cross, that the destination is not one they will call home. But shouldn't a faith as big and as welcoming and as loving as this one have a way to embrace those experiences too, to allow divergent journeys and to still be a part of it, journeys that look vastly different than the ones that we're used to? So, in writing this, I realized that this message is in part a response to the sermon that Reverend Marcus gave last fall, the Sunday after the election. The words that he spoke that gave me hope when I was craving it were to do the next right thing. Even today, I think of how helpful those words were and continue to be in face of just so much awfulness. At the same time, as I hold these words, I cannot help but think of this faith, the faith that has accepted me and invited me in, has given me the opportunity to guide young people and foster their spiritual development, the faith that I do not identify with, but I still love. There is conflict there, and it comes from one word: right. It is wonderful to do the right thing. It is a blessing to make things better and to improve and to do good, but we will not always do the right thing. A journey will have pain and failure. It is not only the steps forward that we must accept. It is the stumbles, the trials, the knowledge that we will fail, that we will hurt those around us. As liberals, as progressives, as leftists, as UUs, we can often become fixated on being right, on doing the right thing, on guiding others down the right path. But the right thing is ephemeral and capricious. It rarely makes itself known, nor can we grasp its true nature. So when we fail to find the right thing, instead, we do nothing. Nothing. Nothing is better than the wrong thing, right? I would like to read to you a passage from Wilhelmina Wilmarth's Statement of Religious Identity. This is an example of what the teens talked about during their final presentation. She did not present on this day, but if you were there this past May, you'll know that this is very representative of what our teens spoke about. When asked about my religion, I always gave a different response. I'm an atheist. I don't have a religion. I'm a Unitarian Universalist. The inconsistency was almost painful. In middle school, some people seemed to suddenly have an awareness that they existed in this world, leading to people making their identities. Gender, sexuality, religion, personality type, Hogwarts house, I'm a Ravenclaw. As I navigated through all of these experiences and continue to, one still stood out, puzzling me. The definitely simple and not all complex frenemy of mine, religion. I always got uncomfortable thinking about it, and if I'm being honest, a little bit jealous. I watched my friends have bat mitzvahs, listened to their religious awakenings and encounters with God they experienced while they slept. I wanted that. I remember visiting the old degrading missions in Central California not too long ago. I recall stepping into the church, awestruck as I stared up at the high ceilings. I can still smell the cool scent of dust, stone, and age. A slight draft blew in from the warm outside, quickly turning into an almost frozen breeze. inside the cold, dark room as it twined around my feet. I felt a sense I'd never really felt before, an eerie, mesmerizing chill. Looking up at the piercing stare from the Virgin Mary cradling young Jesus from a shelf, I felt unsettled. I briskly walked out to examine the tool used for grinding wheat, yet that experience has stuck with me. I wish I knew why. Mina continues. When I first learned that I would have to present a statement of religious identity, surprisingly, I felt just a slight bit panicked. I had spent 13 years not knowing my religion, and now I had to figure it out in 8 months? Oh well, I thought. The school year's just begun. I've got ages. Well, here I am now, at the end of my 7th grade year. I went a little faster than I had accounted for, turns out, and I've found that sometimes it can be easier to know what you aren't, rather than what you are. So here's what I'm not. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a blind believer. And I'm not someone who believes that your life has already written out for you the day you are born. I've realized that instead of this day marking a stopping point in childhood and uncertainty in religion, it's a beginning to much, much more than I can ever know at this moment. But that's okay. I'm ready for it. To love the journey is to accept no such end. The most important steps a person can take is always the next one. The next step does not need to be right or wrong. It must simply be another step, for the act of choosing in and of itself is righteous, and sometimes it is taking steps down the wrong way that are the most important. I started this message off by saying that I feel weird being up here, that I am using this time with all of you as an excuse to work out my own issues with Unitarian Universalism, and that's still true. But is my gripe with this faith really that it tries to guide us in the right direction? Surely the message of this sermon can't be that contrarian. No, I don't think that's what this all amounts to. Journey before destination. If we stop, the journey ends. It is tempting to want a journey to end. It's comforting, it is safe, it becomes easier to tell others to follow in your footsteps because you'll know where they end up. The reason I find friction with Unitarian Universalism, that my students do not experience spirituality in the same way their parents and elders do, is because this faith is so often treated as a destination. We try to bridge young people into being adult UUs. We curate a journey, we hold expectations for how they will find spirituality, and when we do it wrong, we are corrected back to the right path, or we abandon it altogether. Right now, there are hundreds of young Unitarian Universalists who are seeking spiritual community. They are the young people of Wire UUP, the children of lifelong members, teenagers about to face the cliff, who will be met with the one-way bridge. They are the youth of this community and their friends. They are who the children of this congregation will be in just a few short years. These young adults will not do things the right way. Many have no interest in Sunday service or experiencing their faith in ways that those who came before them have. They will do it wrong, and in doing so will carve out their own beautiful, complicated, imperfect meaning in a world that defies understanding. So what do? We do not wait for these young people at the faith we hope their journey takes them. Do not give directions from afar, guiding them towards a place that they don't feel ownership of. Instead, start that journey once more. Pack up your bags, bring the essentials, and leave some things behind. Join these young people on the road, knowing full well that they will take wrong turns, that they will fall, and that by joining them, we share in those stumbles. But in those wrong turns, we will take new roads. We will trade some of our supplies for new ones. Embrace your journey and the journey of others, and instead of building bridges to the right destination, walk next to those who are most in need of companions. May you fall so you get up again. May you travel in good company, and may what you do next, be it right or wrong, not be your destination. May it be so. one last thing. It'll only take a couple more minutes. I just want to say that we are so lucky to have an RE program here at UUCSR that has changed and grown so much over the past few decades. It has been first and foremost defined by the children and families of our community, whose presence, participation, and support are what preclude and inform the education we provide. And of course, there are amazing staff and volunteers of RE who do the most important work of actually teaching. Our staff members, Zoe, Rowan, and Annika, our teen helpers, Elder, and Owen, and Jake, and Dylan, and sometimes even Oliver. Our OWL volunteers, Natalie, and Beth, and Jean Smith, and Donna, and Sean. Our music volunteers, Crystal, and Mac, and John Chenoweth. Our RE committee members, Pat, and Carolyn, and Barb, and Carol Kramer. Our ever-willing chaperones, David Pollard and Nate Hobbs. Our D&D volunteers, Rob and Jeff. The countless other folks who I haven't named who have volunteered as teachers, mystery pals, mentors, and for all manner of tasks and duties. It's the hard work of these folks that infuse the many programs of RE with passion and with love. As DRE, I've had the privilege of wearing the hats of a teacher, an OWL facilitator, a dungeon master, a camp counselor, a chaperone, an RE committee member, a worship associate, and worship leader, and many, many others. Wearing these titles, I've had the privilege of tipping the scales on what RE has looked like this past 5 years. I've shoehorned in my own hobbies and interests of Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering, demanded people talk to one another and goof off during service, and learned from and shared the voices of so many incredible, talented, and unique individuals in this community on how to create a program that, at the end of the day, I hope has encouraged young people to explore spirituality in deep and meaningful ways. This past year, knowing that I was stepping down, I've been reflecting a lot on what RE has looked like in the past and what it will look like going forward. After 5 years, it becomes difficult to remember that there are other ways of doing RE, ways that are exciting and wonderful and profoundly different from the manner in which I have done things. And during this time of transition, I want to highlight what RE has looked like in the years before I was here and what they'll look like going forward. To help me do this, I would like to invite Barb Kieser, Jen Fries, and Annika Lawson up. I've asked Barb to speak on behalf of Deb Mason, our DRE from now 7 years ago.
Hello. So Deborah Mason was the DRE from roughly 2007 to 2017 for 10 years. I met her just before she retired and offered to help with the parenting group that she had recently started. I had done parenting groups back in Connecticut for many years, so we facilitated the group together and I learned a lot from her. And then she told me that she was retiring and she wanted me to take over the group. Deb really was the person that invited me into the congregation in a meaningful way. Plus, I was so grateful to get to know Deborah and have the opportunity to become friends. Deborah was passionate about her job as DRE. She loved working with the kids and their families and poured lots of love into her work with them. She went above and beyond to teach and support the children during her tenure. If any child was struggling, she generously spent extra time to support them. Many a congregant benefited from time with her, and up until she died a month ago, she was still in touch with some of the children and teens and young adults from her time as DRE. Deborah believed that the children were our future, that growing and enriching our RE program would draw families and keep them, and that the children would help the congregation grow in lots of different directions, and hopefully they would stay involved even after college. She also recognized that parenting today can be complex, and she started the parenting group for all the parents to share and help each other. Deb loved the group and even cooked dinner for them on the night that they met. She had a gift for generating love and bringing out the best in children and their families. She laid the foundation for a lot of RE programming that continues to this day. Thank you, Deborah.
When I think of Jen's time as DRE, the word that comes to mind over and over again is community. As a parent and a family member of the RE program, Jen's version of RE spoke deeply to the other families she was raising Rory and Owen alongside. I think the many volunteers and staff members she brought in, the connections she formed with parents, she formed during parents' nights and mystery pals, and the multiple classrooms of children she had every Sunday. To me, Jen made this community feel so welcoming as a person who was so outside of all this. And I know I'm not the only person that she brought in. She's responsible for me and Annika being here right now. And I'm speaking on her behalf because she just finished her first week teaching at Annalee High School and is understandably a little wiped. My time teaching RE is informed a lot by the pandemic. I started mid-COVID and we've struggled. A lot of congregations have, bringing back children and families, finding faith in a time where faith feels very difficult. It's been strange. The term I always use is throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what stuck, and it turned out what stuck for me was Dungeons and Dragons and sex education, like peanut butter and jelly. And now as I'm stepping down, I'm looking towards Annika who will become our interim DRE, and I'd like to give her a moment to share a bit about herself and her teaching style and her vision for the future.
Hello. I'm a little weepy. I just want to start by saying a huge thank you to Era and the RE committee and the board for being my advocate in starting this position. I'm honored by your support and your faith in me as I begin, and I hope to go beyond your expectations. Now a little bit about me. For those of you who I have not met yet, or if you've seen me lurking around this building for the last 6 years, hi. I'm Annika Lawson. I have worked here for the last 6 years on and off as I was attending Sonoma State, where I got my bachelor's in liberal studies with a concentration in environmental studies and women and gender studies. I'm originally from Sacramento, and I was raised Unitarian Universalist. I was a member as a child at the Unitarian Universalist Community Church in Sacramento, and then also the UU Society of Sacramento as the UUCC church faded. My mom was raised Unitarian Universalist, and so was her mother, my grandmother, and she was actually the DRE at the Sacramento church briefly in like the 80s or 90s, I think. So you could say I have a bit of a UU legacy going here. I've worked in education in many different forms over the last few years. Mostly outdoor education. I enjoy gardening, hiking, biking, theater, singing, playing sports with my friends like softball and volleyball. And I try to be as involved in the community as I can with social justice things as well. All fun things that I hope to incorporate into the RE curriculum. So I thank you for welcoming me into this new role of DRE, and I'm so excited to get to know you all and to continue our wonderful RE program. So thank you.
To symbolize the passing of this role, UUCSR will be handing you this microphone. The same one that we use every Sunday. I'll be handing her this microphone. I chose this microphone because we don't have stoles as DREs. We have a big hefty chalice back in RUing that I didn't think was appropriate to hand over, but this microphone is used every Sunday to tell a story, start a discussion, to share the voices of our congregation's children, and to create a time for all ages. As a congregation, we are all tasked with supporting and working alongside Hanukkah. Things will be different. Things will change. There will be stumbles and there will be triumphs and successes. And as we take these first new steps in this new leg of our journey together, I ask that you please repeat after me. Annika Lawson. Annika Lawson. With the support, understanding, and kindness, with the support, understanding, and kindness of us, the members of UUCSR, will you accept the responsibility of being our interim DRE? I do.
It's a very torch-like, it's very impressive torch, you know.
All right.
Thank you.